The Israel-Palestine conflict started centuries ago, in the time of the Roman Prime in an age of imperialism. The Roman spread of land led them to the Holy Land of the Jews, and like all places the Romans traveled to, they proceeded to conquer it immediately. They took over the Holy Land of the Jews as early as possible. They did not yet attack the Jews as a culture, though. As Judaism is not a culture of spreading their ideology, the Romans did not deny them from continuing their rituals and beliefs in secret. Their religion was safe from persecution, even though they were oppressed, like every other member of the Roman rule. Soon after, though, the Roman Empire fell, and after it did, Islam was created, and as a religion it began to spread through all of the Middle East due to trade and a spread of ideas. But when the Muslims took over the area of Jerusalem from the Byzantines, the Jews were almost freed. They were no longer oppressed at all. The Muslims let them do what they wished and worship in public. They shared the same God, and at first it was an era of equality and peace within each other's land. This peace was not to last long, though. As time went on, their ideologies were simply too different. The Islam, who had actual control of Jerusalem and Palestine, began restricting Jews praying in public places and attending certain sites. It was, compared to other forms of Jewish persecution, relatively minor though, and while it caused quite a bit of conflict, no wars or revolutions were caused. But everything changed when the European nations attacked. When the Crusaders took over Jerusalem, they not only wanted the land for themselves, they wanted everyone else gone. They completely massacred most of both the Jews and the Muslims living in the Holy Land, and expelled the rest from living within the city. They were left to the outskirts of the area, away from their religious land. This actually brought the two religions together against the Christians, and their combined forces were able to drive them off, ending the First Crusade. This once again caused an era of temporary peace. Muslims and Jews once again worked together, but history is indeed bound to repeat itself. Hostility rose once again, but before the two cultures could reach a breaking point, another ruler came over them. First, the Ottomans took over the area, with a still Islamic rule but with a different ideology. And later the British Isles took over the area once more in their era of imperialism, simply resetting the rising tension once again. Unlike the other empires that just occupied the area though, the British left without any rebellion, just general dislike for them and their practices, along with a weakening empire. And this, surprisingly enough, was the final blow. When the British left, they did one major thing. They split up Palestine into two sections. The Jews got more land than the Muslims. And with no central government, civil war ensued for the land. This was the first true war between Muslim and Jew over Palestine. With no central power, Israel given superiority, and the Islamics being left in the dust, true rage was formed. This was the start of the war that we know of today, the conflict over Israel and Palestine. This war only got worse when 1 year later the State of Israel was established by the West after the results of World War II. Palestine was rendered as no longer a country in the eyes of the world, and this only terribly worsened the conflict. The war only became worse over time. With all-out war finally created, there was no holding back from either side. Israel was under constant fire, whether verbal, physical, or mental, from all of its surrounding neighbors. This led to intense battles like the Six-Day War, a quickly battled war of neighboring countries attacking Jerusalem to attempt to gain their land back, only for more to be taken from them, the War of Attrition, an Egyptian-led war to gain back Sinai, and the Yom Kippur War, an Egyptian and Syrian-led war against Jerusalem to gain back the land lost in the Six-Day War. Both of the latter wars ended with a ceasefire and no true victor, and many more were bound to come. The nations simply seemed to hate each other due to their intense differences, and they could not simply leave each other alone. The question may be, why exactly could they not live and let live? The reasons can easily fit into a few key groups. First and foremost, religious conflict is obviously behind many of these battles. Simply a different ideology, Jewish versus Muslim, caused much strife between the two parties. It is the core to most of this fight, and the difference between their viewpoints made more of a mental gap than anything. Their religion became their cultures, and when every nation had a statewide religion, God and state simply could not be separated. Through this, there was also a political basis of the wars. Land was an important thing, and at numerous times during history, it can be seen that Jerusalem was a very sought-after land. It was religiously desired for being the Holy Land, and through this, it became a political focal point. Not only was this over land, though, but who could be within the land. As religions became cultures, the culture who owns Palestine will want the other cultures out. This means that war and conflict will arise and completely contributed to the problems of Israel and Palestine. Both of these traits also show an ideological difference. Through politics, religion, and more, every side wants to show their superiority and take over the land that they deserve. These wars were religious, political, and ideological. All of these combative traits led to the battles we know today. The Israel-Palestine conflict is based off of struggles centuries old. They only continue on with no end in sight.